Hey everybody, welcome to Geeks and Freaks. We're finally at the end of our 12-day Halloween countdown. When you think of Halloween games, it's hard to avoid the Castlevania series. From the first instalments on the NES, all the way through to the newer iterations in the Lords of Shadow series, the game has gone through a ton of gameplay changes. Most notably with the Symphony of the Night and the Lords of Shadow, which changed the game from a standard 2D platforming affair to a Metroid and God of War inspired titles respectively. But no matter what type of gameplay the series presents us with, there's one characteristic that has consistently remained a staple of the series, and that's its devotion to classic horror archetypes. The series requires players to traverse an ever spooky landscape, from castles to graveyards and everything in between. We're rarely given any scenes that would feel out of place in a Bram Stoker or Mary Shelley novel. From the dated architecture with stained glass windows to the flowing capes and accessories worn by the characters, the Castlevania games drip with gothic atmosphere. Talking about Bram Stoker and Mary Shelley, the games pull their characters straight out of those gothic horror books and older classic horror films. Enemies vary from traditional bumbling zombies to vampires, hunchbacks, Frankenstein monsters and creatures from the Black Lagoon. There's not much in the way of old school gothic horror that isn't at least referenced somewhere in the Castlevania series. In addition to the gothic visuals which are dripping with Halloweeny atmosphere, the sound design of the games is always great, providing upbeat music which somehow doesn't feel out of place when you're traversing the Transylvanian landscape. Gameplay in the original Castlevania series is fairly normal by today's standards. Players can jump, duck and swing a whip in front of them to defeat enemies, with upgrades to the whip being available by collecting upgrades hidden throughout the level. On top of the default attack, players can also pick up a variety of special weapons, which, while providing additional firepower for taking down enemies and bosses, also fits nicely into the gothic horror theme, with weapons varying from crosses and daggers to holy water. The games are, as you may know, notoriously difficult. The slow controls of earlier titles combined with some annoying design features like the fact you fly backwards after being hit result in some unwanted deaths, but the games are fun enough despite these flaws to make you want to keep going. Although more recent spin-off titles have experimented with different narratives, the story of the games typically focuses on a member of the Belmont family, destined to protect the world from the evil that is Dracula, with early titles switching control between Simon Belmont and his ancestor Trevor in a story that spanned generations but never lost focus on the core gameplay and horror aesthetics that made the series so popular. More recently, the Lords of the Shadow series mixed things up, replacing the typically 2D games with a vast 3D endeavour which took inspiration from, among other things, games like God of War and Shadow of the Colossus. This time we control Gabriel Belmont, an even older ancestor as we experience the events of the Castlevania world pre-Dracula. The absence of series mains villains doesn't do much to reduce the gothic horror aspects though, with vampires, werewolves and goblins still having a huge presence. In an interesting twist, the second title in the Lords of Shadow series has a controlling Dracula himself, flicking between present day and old school settings as we piece together how the Lord of Darkness came to be, whilst also having access to some pretty cool vampire abilities. With 30 years of Castlevania games behind us already, there's really little we can talk about here that hasn't been said a million times, but it wouldn't be a Halloween list if we didn't talk about the series that screams horror in its sleep. If you haven't had a chance to play any of the Castlevania games, we literally couldn't recommend them enough. Bar a few anomalies like the N64 titles, the series is pretty much 10 out of 10 when it comes to putting out great games, so if you're looking for a spooky series to get into, there's really no bad place to start. So that's it, it's Halloween and our countdown is complete. I hope I got you in the mood to play a few spooky games. If these were games that you already knew about and I got you a bit nostalgic about them, that's great, but if you hadn't heard of them before and I'd introduce you to them for the first time, that's even better. As always, if you've got any suggestions for games that you think I missed or games I should have included or just want to talk about spooky games that you know, make sure you drop those in the comments. Like and subscribe for more from Geeks and Freaks, and other than that, thank you very much for watching. Bye.